It has always seemed very strange to me that nobody wants to evaluate or question our system of education in terms of justice and injustice. Many people want to become medical doctors. Some are going to have that opportunity, others are not. Isn't there an inevitable question of, or an inevitable problem of, justice and injustice just in the distribution of that opportunity, the access to that opportunity, right? How the winners and losers are chosen. And the example of becoming a medical doctor rests on relatively easily verified facts and scores. When you take a look at the way Cambridge University or Oxford University in England, the way they choose who will get the opportunity to write a PhD in anthropology. Anthropology, a science where, there is no objective measure of who has the talent to do this. Who's going to get a PhD or a master's degree in dance or art or literature or poetry? Whose poetry deserves to be published? Sure. But who deserves to get advancement in the education system because of their opinions about someone else's poetry, where there are no objective criteria? And in my own experience, even in fields where there is something as tangible and verifiable as language ability, like can you read Chinese or not in order to get ahead in this program Chinese, the actual question of who is selected to be a winner and who is a loser is not based on verifiable, factually real questions of ability at all. It's not even based on things like how many peer-reviewed publications you've published. Not at all. At Cambridge and Oxford in England, very often the selection of who is a winner and who is a loser is based on the student and the supervisor, the senior professor, having a nice little chat, meeting up and chatting with one another. Since early childhood, it always seemed to me very strange that nobody wanted to question the lottery. Nobody wanted to question gambling in terms of justice and injustice. Now, boxing is a somewhat morally disturbing sport, because if you want to win at boxing, you want someone else to lose. Your own victory entails someone else being badly hurt and injured. Morally, we all seem to be comfortable with this as long as it's between consenting adults who understand the risks. There's some other kinds of terms and conditions for who is and who isn't allowed to go into a boxing match. But you're risking brain damage, you're risking serious injury, in some cases death. Once in a while people do actually die in the boxing ring. And strangely, everyone is perfectly comfortable with this in the 21st century. If you walk up to a roulette table and you want to win, it means you want everyone else to lose, and not by any virtue they may have, not by any virtue you may have and that they lack, not because you're better than them or smarter than them. You want to walk up to that roulette table and win just because you're you, and you want everyone else at that table to lose their money. Because if the wheel spins and it's your number that wins, that means there's a whole lot of other people that lose. It's much more surreal than a boxing match, where at least we have the consoling delusion that hard work or virtue decides who is the winner and who is the loser. Now, on formal lottery gambling, so people buying lottery tickets, whether those are scratch and win tickets, or you buy the number and then hear on the radio what's the winning number. This principle has been scaled up to such an extent that it resembles taxation. Right? On a massive scale, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people buy a ticket knowing that they will lose, but somebody will win. So this is like a roulette table where the number is going to spin and the vast majority of people are going to lose, but somebody somewhere is going to win, not based on any virtue they have that you lack, completely arbitrarily. And people are happy to pay this tax. People are perfectly satisfied. They have no sense of injustice, knowing that many thousands of people, or even millions of people, are being taxed unjustly, if you want, or having their money taken away from them, or becoming a little bit poorer, so that somebody, somewhere, arbitrarily, will have this positive opportunity, whether it's that they win $10,000 or they win $1 million, right? People accept this. I think there is a very similar logic at a deep level culturally in people accepting that somebody somewhere is going to get the chance to learn Sanskrit. Somebody somewhere is going to get the chance to learn ancient Greek. Somebody somewhere is going to get the chance to become an X-ray technician. And they don't really care who it is, as long as it is, in this way, arbitrary and indifferent. And all of us are paying for it. Whether you live in Canada or Denmark or England or even the United States of America. In fact, we are all buying lottery tickets to support this lottery. We are all paying taxes. Look at the percentage. Even in the United States of America, where people pay a lot of money in tuition, look at how many millions of dollars the government is giving to support those same universities that charge those high rates of tuition, right? It's shocking. But there's a lot of money being poured in from the taxpayers also. Throughout Western Europe, throughout the Western world, right? We're all paying for somebody to win the lottery with no questions asked, with no standard, no accountability, no transparency as to who should get that opportunity, who merits it, who deserves it, because we feel comfortable that somebody will win the lottery. Now, there are problems here. When I was a kid, there were two types of professors in the whole sphere of politics, history, and economics. I wish I had one word for that range of subjects. There were two types of professors. There were die-hard Marxists who found one excuse after another to say something positive about Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong, and to teach you their crazy, superstitious reinterpretation of the world history in terms of Karl Marx's dialectical materialism. You know, they were in big numbers in academia when I was a kid, right? And then there would be these more skeptical, anti-communist, historical revisionists, if you want, who are looking at the same history and the same politics and saying, well, where did this all go wrong? People who are willing to admit communism in Russia was a disaster. People who are willing to admit communism in China was a disaster. And a lot of those people in academia, when I was a kid, a lot of them had been communists when they were younger. They had been Marxists, but over time they got cynical. They developed a more nuanced perspective. I'm not joking. I'm from Canada. All right, where I didn't have any right-wing Christian conservative professors. Period. They did not exist in the social milieu I was born into. So this was kind of the political range. There were people committed to making excuses for Marxism and communism, and there were people willing to ask hard questions about it. What if you have a department in a university, or you have a field of study where 100% of the people are the true believers, 100% of the people are the crazy communists or the Marxists? What happens in that field? With ideologies that are much less obvious to outsiders than communism, this happens in one field after another, again and again, right? Like, oh, our whole department are just people who worship the intellectual legacy of Foucault or Marcuse, or our whole department is just people who worship Noam Chomsky, and you have a pro-Chomsky linguistics department where it's linguistics mixed with Marxism and communism, by the way, this kind of far-left ideology. Or, women's studies could be this wonderful, vibrant field of research and education. Take a look at what the ideology is that defines a particular department of women's studies, right? And who is being filtered out, who is being excluded, and who is being recruited into that department on a like-minded basis. Right? So very briefly, you can imagine most departments, most, not all, that study Christianity, they will only recruit Christian students, Christian professors, and, sessional lecturers, teaching assistants, MA students, PhD students. They will only recruit and reward people who share the particular Christian ideology of that department, right? Christians are actually maybe especially open-minded. You'd be surprised. Christians, just because of the nature of their religion, they actually may be more open to inviting in a sinner. They may, a Protestant may be more open to including a Catholic or a Jew in their department than any other religion. You might think it's the most narrow-minded religion, but in academia, it's not, right? But, what about someone who is an overt atheist, nihilist, who wants to look in a hard-hitting way at Christianity and slavery, where they want to do research that is just completely condemning the history of the church, the institution of slavery in the church, something like, What if, so specific area of research, this is real. What if you have someone who wants to do research on Catholic priests who left France to go to Cambodia and Vietnam and got huge numbers of women pregnant and operated orphanages where they were buying female slaves? I've read accounts of this, right? Like the role of liberating slaves that end up becoming the sexual pawns of Christian missionaries. This is really embarrassing. Is that research going to be? Are they going to hold a conference on that? Are they going to teach that in their classes? Are they going to incorporate that into the real? Something really hard for that field to deal with. And if you're new to the channel, you don't know this about me. I was a scholar of Buddhism for many years. I was asking questions that tough, that hard to deal with within Buddhist studies. Okay, can the people who work in Buddhist studies actually recruit, actually reward, actually educate, actually give credentials to someone who asks tough questions that really challenge that field, including, by the way, questions about slavery, questions about sex, questions about corruption, but even the questions I was asking about the history of meditation, mistranslation of meditation into English, what the ancient texts say and what moderns mean. Those were deeply disturbing questions to people in positions of authority, people in positions of power in academia. And the answer is no. They can't deal with it. So what happens one generation after another in this lottery where there is absolutely no transparency, there's absolutely no meritocracy in the sense of having objectively verifiable, real criteria whereby we choose, you get this opportunity and you don't. Now, one of the telltale aspects from my perspective is just how high the rate of attrition is in elite university programs. That when you give people these opportunities, a remarkably large number of them, once they go there, once they start spending the money and spend time, once they figure out what the nature of the opportunity is, a remarkably high number of them do drop out. So I'll stick with Buddhist studies just for the sake of it. I knew I could use specific faces and specific names to this. A scenario I saw play out again and again is a young man who is a hippie, has been into marijuana and LSD and maybe has done some drug tourism to Thailand, and feels he's an open-minded person, goes and approaches the professor, and they have a very nice, charming chat where he's not in any way offensive to the professor or challenging to the professor's authority. And they're taken on as a MA student or one of these package programs where they're doing an MA going on to a PhD or something on this basis of seeming like a nice young chap. Probably this person was born rich. And again, they went on vacation in India. They went on vacation in Thailand. They think they're into this, groovy Buddhism. And then once they're given this opportunity, guess what? They find out what the hard work of the field is. It's the type of hard work I actually did, and I demonstrated that I could do. But guess what? This field is about sitting with a manuscript, and the language work, the translation work, even the social science research, going and interviewing people in prison about prison conditions and Buddhist chaplains. There's all kinds of important social science research to do related to Buddhism also. What's going on with Buddhism and HIV/AIDS? Do you ever think about that? There are really interesting questions for the right people to handle. But those are not the people you're recruiting. A very large percentage of the people given this opportunity, right? They burn out, they flake out, they drop out. And the greatest tragedy of all is the ones who don't go on to become completely useless professors who spend their time trying to recruit and reward the same sort of completely useless student that they were before. Communists in the Department of History, Marxists in the Department of Women's Studies, same pattern. And on a massive scale, right, what we get through this lottery-like education system is the apotheosis of mediocrity. We get whole institutions where people have no ambition, there is no pursuit of excellence. People spend their whole careers just trying to conceal their ignorance, conceal their mediocrity, and recruit like-minded people who will affirm their own high opinion of themselves. You get a kind of expertise that is, with the passage of time, increasingly detached from the real-world outcomes that the discipline was supposed to accomplish in the first place. Anthropology is a dramatic example of this, right? So let's just talk about British anthropology to specify a bit. French anthropology is a little bit different. German anthropology is a little bit different. But like anthropology in the English-speaking world was founded on the example of, a brilliant young man going out to live with a remote tribal group in Africa or Papua New Guinea where the language had barely been documented, like there may be no textbook, there may be no dictionary for this language, and laboring for years to become fluent in that language, laboring for years to gain the trust of the medicine man or the chief in that society, and to document and explain to the Western world what their culture is, what their religion is, how their society works, right? This is this kind of heroic vision of going out and working at the frontiers of what is known or knowable in the living cultures of the world and documenting it, right? So there's a guy named Boaz, B-O-A-Z, B-O-A-Z if you're American, and this guy presided over similar heroic attempts to document the culture and the legends of Canada's Indigenous people, the tribal people, such as they still existed at the time. They weren't really tribal anymore. But, to write down their legends, their literature, their stories, and their language, which begins with taking white people and immersing them in that culture and having them really practice the language up to this high level of ability where you can do that. So even with a modern language that exists in the real world, think about how tough that would be for you to do right now in an easy language like Russian or Chinese. And I mean easy in the sense of there is a dictionary, there is an app on your phone, there are a lot of resources. Okay, now think about it with a language where none of those resources exist, where you're really the first person on the field. That was the definition of what anthropology was supposed to be about. And now look at the reality of what anthropology actually is in academia today, and what the actual abilities are of the people who are produced by master's degree programs and PhD programs. What is it they're capable of? Long story short, the first thing to disappear was the language aspect, because it's very expensive to teach and hard to evaluate. Are you actually producing people with these high levels of language ability? But you're going to see people. I can give you a ton of real world examples. There's a woman who did her thesis on the fashion industry in Milan, going and interviewing people in the fashion industry. There's a woman who did a motorcycle vacation in Vietnam and didn't even learn the language. There are people. It's really like tourism as an academic discipline now, right? And people just write about their own feelings. They go to some exotic foreign country and write a memoir of what they did, and that's a PhD in anthropology, and they go on to produce other people with PhDs in anthropology. The downward spiral is dramatic. Now look, I think the fundamental reason why people are comfortable with the injustice of the lottery is the sense that it doesn't matter. Most likely in the country where you live, they have these scratch tickets, And let's say the scratch ticket. So this is a piece of paper, and you scratch off with a coin. And when you reveal the part you scratched off, you found out if you win or you lose. This is one mode of government-created gambling. In most countries, the ticket will cost $5, and maybe the maximum you can win is $5,000. Right? This particular type of gambling, they don't give you $1 million. It doesn't go that high for different reasons. I think including the fear of fraud or what have you. There are different types of lotteries in different countries. Everyone knows it's stupid. Everyone knows it's pointless, but they feel like, look, it's only $5. All of us pay $5, and somebody somewhere will win $50,000. And it probably won't even change their lives that much. It'll just be a nice, funny, happy thing for somebody somewhere. Right? The problem is there are real world consequences to the corruption of our education system this way. All right? We've been through a series of unbelievably tumultuous political changes last 20 years, let's say. Or yeah, this is now 2021. I can remember September 11th, 2001. Okay? After September 11th, 2001, I remember I was at a university. I studied the politics of the Muslim world at university. Not the only thing I studied, but this is one of the topics I studied, right? And we had one professor teaching that topic. And he and I were friends. You can guess why. He and I were friends. We talked about our personal lives. He was getting divorced at that time. He talked about his personal life with me, all this stuff. We really were not just professor and student. And he was the first professor who told me to read Max Stirner, Philosophy of Max Stirner, which is now discussed in my channel. So we influenced each other's lives in different ways. All right. And the whole university's attitude before September 11th, 2001 was that politics in the Muslim world was something marginal that didn't matter. He had to fight to get a half credit course added to the schedule. Like, nobody cares. And this is, just think geographically what a huge part of the world this is. No. They were telling him to just teach a generalized course on political philosophy. They're telling him to teach kind of fluff nonsense and not to insist on doing this kind of hard research on what's happening, what was unfolding at that time in Iraq, Iran, Saudi Arabia. It's a huge part of the world. It goes on and on. Indonesia. Right, okay. September 11th, 2001 happens. And the senior management of the university and of the department come to him and say, we made a mistake. We want to offer you a contract. We want to give you all of a sudden this matters. And, he told them they can stuff it down their hat. And he suddenly had job offers from New York and Washington, D.C. All of a sudden, this area of expertise was in high demand. Right? That was one moment where we had to stop and ask, where now are your great scholars? Where now are your great specialists of the politics and languages and history of the Middle East? However you want to term it, of the Arabic-speaking world, of the Muslim world, right? Each of these terms has different borders on the map. They are not synonymous, right? Where now, in 2021, even today, where now are your great scholars of Afghanistan? Where now are your great scholars of the politics of China, kind of a small country, of India, of Pakistan, of the political relationships between these countries? How many people do you have who can even read and respond to what's happening in the newspapers of Nepal, of Uzbekistan? There is a real social need for competence and for profound levels of linguistic and political ability, right, in each one of these languages in a country like the United States, Canada, or England. And when you need it, all of a sudden you turn to academia and say, so who can we recruit? Even if you're trying to recruit people into the CIA, even if you're trying to recruit people into the army, and they do that, they try to hire people. All of a sudden, we need people with expertise, and it turns out the university isn't producing that at all. And you can sit there. I've done this. You can sit there with a stack of the master's degree thesis that these people have produced. It just happened to be MA theses. I remember sitting with a stack of these on paper and leafing through them. We have an MA thesis here about feminism and how Karl Marx was right about everything. You start flipping through and seeing the research people are actually doing, what it is that justifies having an MA or a PhD in any one of these fields. And trust me, what's going on even in a field like Buddhist studies, like even something that's as specific and technically management does that. It is just that bad. I think what begins with the lottery mentality of accepting that an opportunity for someone somewhere is good enough for all of us everywhere, that we can all contribute our tax dollars, we can all buy the lottery tickets so that someone somewhere, can have this opportunity. It results in a whole society based on the blind leading the blind. You have an education system that recruits and rewards incompetence, that creates ideological silos of self-serving people who only want to work with others who share their fundamental assumptions in life, who will reinforce their sense of their own ego, right? Reaffirm their sense of security in their unchallenged competence, when in reality, the decades have gone past, and even in easily verifiable things like, can you actually read this language? Can you actually do this work? The professors lack the competence, and they produce one generation of students after another who lack this kind of competence also. Is there a solution to be found just in this simple, storied concept of justice? I think that in Western democracies, it's only when people perceive an injustice that things start to change.